Good morning, friends and families. Carl here. It's, I don't know, about crack of dawn. Sun's coming up. I'm on my way up to the hunting camp to help do a little bit of work, getting ready for deer season. But, yeah, I just wanted to get on here real quick and share some thoughts that I've been having lately regarding, well, just, I guess, regarding our testimony and witness, and the prevailing attitude that I see in society nowadays, which is, for the most part, people will say things like, well, I don't care what you think of me, and, or I don't care what you say, I don't care what you think, I'm gonna do what I want. And, just that prevailing attitude in society today. And, I think that type of attitude is really detrimental to those of us that name the name of Christ, who walk around and, say, well, I don't care what people think of me, I'm going to do what I do. Well, the reality is while it is true we shouldn't care what people think about us in terms of our walk with God, whether they like it or not, our stand for the truth, whether they like it or not, and, things of that nature. But at the same time, me as a minister of the gospel, I can be bold without being rude, and to an extent, I do care what people think about me, not in terms of, compromising my stand for the truth or my walk in righteousness or, my desire to further the gospel, but rather the attitude, the demeanor, and the countenance with which I live. I care what people think about me in terms of, am I being a true witness for Christ? Am I demonstrating the love of Christ when I interact with people? Or am I just bold and arrogant and brash, and I don't care what people think, and I'm going to tell you my mind, and like it or leave it? No, I don't think that attitude is right. We should care about our witness, about our testimony. Am I being a true and proper representation of the love of Christ as one of Christ's ambassadors? Am I true to what Christ has called me to accomplish here on this earth in spreading his gospel, in showing people his love, in being a demonstration that Christ is in fact raised from the dead and lives in me, and so I think that, the prevailing attitude in the world, in the world system, of people being like, well, I don't care what you think, and that, I think people believe that gives them a license or an excuse just to be ignorant, and just to treat people like crap. Well, my friends, nowhere in the gospel does it say that we're to treat people like garbage simply because we have a disagreement with them, or they, don't follow God the way we do, or whatever the case might be. We as believers can be bold, but bold and rude are not the same thing. I can be bold in my witness and sharing my testimony without being rude and condescending to others. And so, that whole attitude of, I don't care what you think about me, or I don't care, kind of thing, I think it's a bad witness when people have that attitude. And I've met, unfortunately, people that claim the name of Christ that have that attitude. It's the same attitude that the world has. I don't care what you think, I'm going to do what I do, I'm going to say what I say, blah, 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 and you just have to take it. Well, that's not the meekness and gentleness of Christ. You know, Christ was meek and gentle. Now, meekness is not weakness. Rather, meekness is controlled strength. It's having that self-control, the ability to control yourself when in your flesh, in your own mind, in your own mentality, you want to lash out at somebody, or you want to respond sarcastically because they are being, dumb or whatever, but you don't do it because you're rather you're trying to win that person over by showing and demonstrating the love of Christ, instead of saying, well, you go to hell and I don't care. Man, that ain't no attitude to have, bruh. And so, I just kind of think that as believers, we need to check ourselves when we start demonstrating that same attitude that the world has, that, well, I don't care what you think. Well, to an extent, yeah, that's true. But at the same note, I would rather have people dislike me because of the message I preach and not the method that I preach it with. When I go out on the streets and preach, I don't tell people with glee or joy that, you're lost and you're going to hell and ha 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 for you. No, my heart breaks for people, man. And I plead and beg with them, like the Bible says, we are ambassadors for Christ, and it's as though God is beseeching them through us. He's pleading with them through us, be ye reconciled unto God. And so, when we have a haughty, prideful, arrogant attitude toward non-believers simply because they don't live how we think they should, and they don't have Christ, you can't expect the unsaved and the lost to live as a Christian, because they're not going to do it, not until they're born again. But they're not going to be born again with me thumbing my nose at them, looking down my nose, condescending to them, telling them that they're wrong and there's nothing they can do about it. Come on, man, really? No, I can share the love of Christ. I can speak the truth in love. I can stand for righteousness. I can be bold in my faith without being rude, without being arrogant, without being ignorant, and without purposely, because look, the gospel by itself is offensive to the flesh, right? And it takes a certain degree of humbling for an individual to realize that, yes, I am lost. I need Jesus. I'm in sin and I need forgiveness for my sins. That when we attack people, when we're ignorant and rude and brash, that immediately they throw up that defense. They throw up that wall, because who wouldn't, right? And so as believers, we've got to be careful that we maintain our witness and our testimony without being arrogant, without coming off as haughty or thinking we're holier than thou, and having the world's attitude of, well, I don't care what you think. Come on, man, really? We've got to, as believers, do better. And when we go to win the lost, and realize that our testimony is one of the most powerful tools that we have. But if our witness and our testimony are contradicting the love of Christ because of our attitude and our approach, bro, we're doing the gospel a disservice. So that was just my thoughts for this morning on this little morning drive up to the country. So I hope some kind of way you were blessed and edified and encouraged. And look, that's all for now. So later.